Have you ever laid in bed in the middle of the night in a completely quiet house and found yourself staring at the bedroom door? Not a closed door, a door that's left open just like an inch or two, a crack of negative space leading out into the unlit hallway. There's a specific kind of tension in a door that's left ajar. It's not closed, keeping you safe and perfectly contained in your own familiar environment, and it's not fully open, freely inviting the rest of the house inside it. It's caught in a state of suspension. It's a boundary that can't make up its mind. And if you stare at that crack of darkness long enough, you start to feel a strange, subtle shift in the air pressure of the room. You start to feel the draft. You realize that the warm, still air in your room is slowly, invisibly mixing with the cold air in the dark hallway. Two different environments, quietly bleeding into one another, while you're just lying there, watching the shadows stretch. You ever think about how much of our lives are spent in the spaces between things? How much of the universe is just a series of thresholds, and we're just standing in the doorway, waiting for our eyes to adjust to the light. In a world full of noise, trust the signal. If you're hearing this, you've already found it. This is Dove and Serpent Radio. I don't know where you're listening from tonight. Maybe you're sitting on the porch of an old house, listening to the wind move between the trees, watching the headlights of a single car sweep across the road and disappear. Maybe you're in a brightly lit kitchen, staring at the hum of a refrigerator, glass of water sitting untouched on the counter. Or maybe you're driving, moving fast down a long stretch of empty highway, suspended in that hypnotic liminal space between where you started and where you're supposed to end up. But picture this for a second. Ancient Rome, thousands of years ago, before the modern grid of the world was laid down. The Romans understood that space was not just physical. Space was psychological. They had a god entirely dedicated to the strangeness of the boundary, and his name was Janus, or Janus. Now, Janus is usually depicted with two faces. One face looks forward into the future. The other face looks backward into the past. And he was the god of gates, the god of doorways, the god of beginnings and endings. He wasn't the god of the safe house. He wasn't the god of the open road. He was the god of the exact geometric plane that separated the two. In the Roman Forum, there was a temple called the Janus Geminus. It was a very simple structure, and essentially it was just a set of massive, heavy double doors. But the way they used this temple was completely contrary to how we think about safety. During times of peace, the doors of the temple were pulled shut. They were locked tight. The boundary was secure. But when Rome went to war, the heavy doors were thrown wide open, and they stayed open until the conflict was resolved. Now think about the psychological weight of that. When the doors were open, it meant the threshold had been breached. It meant that chaos, violence, and transformation were actively flowing from the outside world into the empire. The open door was a state of emergency. It meant the draft was coming in, We are deeply instinctively obsessed with the boundary, even now in the modern world. With all our bright screens and our seamless digital transitions, our biology remembers the gravity of the threshold. You know the feeling. You walk into a room and instantly forget why you went in there. Psychologists call it the doorway effect, and it's a real cognitive phenomenon. When you physically cross a threshold, your brain registers the change in environment and dumps its short-term memory cache, preparing to process a new reality. Passing through a door literally wipes your mind clean for a fraction of a second. Now, there's a reason I'm telling you all this. We spend so much of our time trying to furnish the rooms of our lives. We try to make the spaces comfortable. We build careers. We build relationships. We build identities. But lately, things have felt different, haven't they? Lately, it doesn't feel like we're sitting in the room anymore. It feels like we're standing in the doorway. Maybe you've noticed how time seems to be pooling around your ankles, moving strangely, stretching out and snapping back. The conversations you have during the day feel slightly out of focus. You look at the news, you look at the trajectory of the modern world, and you get this heavy atmospheric sense that something massive is ending. But the new thing hasn't actually begun yet. You're caught in the air pressure of the hallway. You're caught in the draft. I want to show you something strange. Now, keep this image in mind. If you go to Japan, you will see them everywhere. Torii gates. They're the traditional Japanese gates most commonly found at the entrance of a Shinto shrine. They're usually painted a bright, striking vermilion orange. 2 vertical pillars crossed by 2 horizontal beams. But what makes a torii gate so fascinating is that it rarely has a wall attached to it. Now, in Western architecture, a gate is a hole in a barrier. You build a massive stone wall, and you put an iron gate in the middle to control the flow of traffic. The gate exists because the wall exists. But the torii gate exists on its own. It's a doorway standing completely free in the open air. And there's a famous one built out in the water of the Seto Island Sea. And when the tide is high, the massive wooden gate appears to be floating, completely untethered on the surface of the ocean. There are no fences. There are no walls to keep anyone out. A boat could simply sail around it. A person walking on the beach at low tide could just walk a few feet to the left and bypass the structure entirely, but that's not the point. The torii is not a physical barrier. It's a spiritual boundary. It marks the transition from the profane to the sacred, from the ordinary, chaotic, everyday world into a space where the rules of reality are slightly different. The genius of the torii gate is the understanding that a threshold does not need a wall to be real. You don't need a physical lock to know that you're stepping out of one world into another. You just need to recognize the geometry of the crossing. I was reading about the construction of the gate, and it's incredibly heavy. It's made of massive camphor wood logs. But here's the secret. The pillars are not buried deep in the mud. They're not bolted to the bedrock. The gate simply rests on the sea floor, held in place purely by its own massive weight. And because of this, it survived centuries of brutal typhoons and earthquakes. And when a massive storm hits, a rigid concrete wall would crack and shatter under the force of the ocean, but the Torii Gate just absorbs the impact. It shifts slightly, it breathes with the water, and it remains standing. It's heavy enough to hold the space, but flexible enough not to be broken by the storm. Sometimes, when your attention becomes fragmented, when the everyday routine starts to feel dreamlike and thin, we panic. We try to build walls. We try to force our lives back into a rigid, controlled structure. We want a heavy door that we can lock against the chaos of the world. But maybe you don't need a wall. Maybe you just need to be heavy enough to hold your own space. Maybe you just need to stand in the water and let the tide wash through you, knowing exactly where your internal boundary lies, without needing to prove it to the ocean. You can almost hear the water, can't you? The slow, heavy pull of the tide moving around the wood. Let's step away from the water for a minute. Let's go somewhere dry. Let's go deep into the stone. Thousands of years before the Romans built the Temple of Janus, and thousands of years before the first Torii Gate was painted orange, the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with the architecture of the afterlife. They believed that when a person died, their spirit, their ka, still needed to interact with the world of the living, still needed nourishment, still needed a way to come home. So, inside their massive, elaborate tombs, on the western wall of the burial chamber, they carved something incredible. They carved a false door. If you look at one of these false doors in Saqqara or Giza, it's a masterpiece of illusion. It's carved out of a single massive block of solid red granite or limestone. It features incredibly detailed door jambs, a lintel, and a central panel that looks exactly like a wooden door, rolled down and shut tightly, but it is solid rock. It doesn't open. It's got no hinges. If you push on it, you're just pushing against the immovable weight of a mountain. To the living, it was a dead end. But the false door was not built for the living. It was built for something that operates on a different frequency. The Egyptians placed an offering table directly in front of the solid stone. The family of the deceased would bring bread and beer and meat and leave it at the foot of the false door. They believed that the ka could step straight through the solid rock, passing from the eternal unseen world into the physical tomb, consume the spiritual essence of the food, and then step back through the stone. It was a doorway built entirely for a ghost. A threshold that only worked if you had already left your physical body behind. Think about the profound imagination of that. Think about a civilization carving a heavy, intricate doorway into solid bedrock, knowing full well it would never open, but believing with absolute certainty that traffic was flowing through it every single day. We're always building doors for things we cannot see. I think we're doing it right now in our own minds. When you lie awake at night and your thoughts circle the same memories, the same regrets, the same old arguments and forgotten towns. You're setting up an offering table in front of a false door. You're leaving your energy, your attention, you're leaving your emotion at the boundary of something that is completely solid and unchangeable. The past is a wall of granite. It does not open. But we still wait there. We still hope that some ghost of who we used to be will step through the stone and take the offering and somehow make us feel whole again. It's exhausting. It's the reason the modern world feels so completely draining. We're trying to straddle 1,000 different thresholds at once. We're looking backward into the granite of our own history. And we're looking forward into a future that feels increasingly unstable and chaotic. We are Janus, caught in the doorway, unable to just sit in the room. But what if the doorway is much larger than we think? What if the feeling of standing on a threshold is not just a psychological condition, but a literal, physical reality of the universe we live in? I want to take you out of the ancient tombs. I want to take you off the earth entirely. Let's look out into the absolute dark. For decades, astronomers have been mapping the cosmic microwave background radiation, the CMB. It's the oldest light in the universe, the fading thermal echo of the Big Bang itself. It's a sphere of faint microwave radiation that surrounds us completely, hitting the Earth from every possible direction. When you look at a map of the CMB, it looks like a chaotic, oval-shaped painting of red and blue splotches. It represents tiny temperature fluctuations in the early universe. It's supposed to be relatively uniform. The laws of cosmology dictate that the universe, on a large enough scale, should look basically the same no matter which direction you look. But it doesn't. In 2004, a satellite named WMAP mapped the radiation and found a massive, inexplicable anomaly. They call it the cold spot. It's a region of space that is vastly colder than it should be, and it's huge, spans billions of light years. It's so large and so cold that the standard model of the universe cannot easily explain how it formed. For years, scientists have proposed all sorts of theories. A massive super void empty of galaxies may be a trick of the data. But recently, there's been a different kind of hypothesis floating around the theoretical fringes of astrophysics. A hypothesis that sounds like it belongs in a sci-fi novel. But it's rooted in the terrifying mathematics of string theory and the multiverse. Some physicists have suggested that the cold spot is a bruise, like a scar. They propose that in the incredibly violent early moments of the cosmos, our universe actually collided with another parallel universe. Two massive expanding bubbles of reality bumping into each other in the dark. And the cold spot is the point of impact. It's the lingering thermal signature of the place where our physical reality scraped against a completely alien dimension. Could be nothing but a math error. Could be a totally unremarkable pocket of empty space. Maybe it's just a glitch in the instruments. But let your mind wander down that hallway for a second. What if the cold spot is not just a scar? What if the collision created a fracture? Imagine a boundary, billions of light years away, an edge to the observable universe. We've always assumed that the universe is a closed system, a massive expanding room where the doors are locked and the windows are painted black. But what if there's a crack in the architecture? What if the universe is not a closed room, but a hallway? And what if, at the very edge of our reality, the door is open just an inch or two? This is where it gets strange. In cosmology, there's a massive unsolved problem called dark energy. We know the universe is expanding, and we know the expansion is accelerating. Galaxies are flying apart faster and faster every second. But we don't know what's pushing them. We can't see it. We can't measure it. We just call it dark energy, a placeholder name for a force that makes up nearly 70% of the entire universe. But what if dark energy isn't a substance? What if dark energy is the draft? What if that cold, invisible, relentless force pushing the galaxies apart is just the atmospheric pressure of an entirely different universe, bleeding into our own through a doorway that's been left ajar? The warm air of our reality mixing with the cold air of the void outside. Or floating in a room that is slowly filling with the weather of another world. Suddenly the feeling of unreality doesn't seem so crazy, does it? The feeling that the rules of the daytime world are starting to bend and warp. We're walking around on a tiny rock, worrying about our emails and our schedules, totally oblivious to the fact that the entire cosmos is caught in a liminal space. The door is open. The boundary is breached. The temple of Janus is unlocked. And the chaos of the outside is rushing in, and you can feel it in your bones. You are a biological antenna made of stardust and carbon. You're composed of the exact same matter that is currently being pushed apart by the draft of the cosmos. When you feel that sudden, inexplicable drop in your chest, when you stand in a brightly lit grocery store and feel like you're looking at a stage set that's about to be dismantled, you're not having a breakdown. You're just sensing the open door. You're noticing the draft coming under the floorboards. This is the secret of the liminal space. This is the secret of the threshold. You do not have to fight it. When you find yourself standing in the doorway of your own life, caught between the person you used to be and the person you're becoming, the instinct is to panic. The instinct is to rush forward, to slam the door behind you, force yourself into the next room before the lights are even turned on. We hate the hallway. We hate the waiting room. But the Torii Gate stands in the water, entirely unbothered by the fact that it's not a wall. The false door sits in the dark for thousands of years, patiently holding space for a ghost that doesn't need to knock. You are allowed to just stand in the doorway. You don't have to have the entire universe solved by tomorrow morning. You don't have to have your entire identity pinned down and categorized. You are allowed to exist in the transition. You are allowed to feel the draft and acknowledge the strangeness and watch the air pressure change without needing to immediately build a wall around it. I was thinking about this tonight, looking out the window of the studio. is that deep, absolute dead of night right now. The time when the traffic is completely stopped and the air feels incredibly still. But it's a deceptive stillness. Underneath the quiet, everything is moving. The Earth is hurtling through space. The solar system is being dragged around the center of the galaxy. The edge of the universe is expanding into the dark. The draft is rushing in through the cold spot in the constellation Eridanus. And somewhere, millions of light years away, two realities are rubbing against each other, sharing their atmosphere. We are part of a massive, impossibly strange machine. If you're awake right now, listening to this voice coming through the static, you're already attuned to the threshold. You are already someone who knows how to look into the dark and wait for the signal to come back. Don't let the daytime world tell you that the doorway is empty. Don't let the rigid, clinical logic of the surface convince you that the draft is just your imagination. The mystery is real. The architecture is ancient. And the boundary is exactly where the magic happens. Take a deep breath of that cold, mixed air. Feel the gravity holding you in your chair. Look at the shadows stretching into the hallway. You don't need to cross over tonight. You don't need to close the door. Just stand in the negative space and let the strange beauty of the universe wash over you. The sun will come up soon enough. The boundary will harden. The world will demand that you pick a room and stay inside it. But for now, in this pocket of the night, the door is open. Keep your eyes on the threshold. Trust the draft. And whatever you do, keep that signal close. You've been listening to Dove and Serpent Radio. And until next time, stay strange in the silence and keep the dial somewhere between wonder and understanding.